The metal floor beneath her feet vibrated with a low, merciless hum, like the breath of a machine that had no conscience. Around her, towering walls curved upward into darkness, carved with symbols she had studied in books but never believed she would face in reality. The air smelled sharp and artificial, stripped of warmth, stripped of mercy. Below the platform, the pit opened wide, an abyss designed not for death, but for something far worse, a system where choice was replaced by obligation, where individuality dissolved into biological expectation. She stood straight anyway. Her species valued obedience above all else, but she had never been good at obedience. She had been a scholar, a translator, a quiet observer of other civilizations. She had traveled worlds to understand meaning, language, emotion. And yet here she was, reduced to a statistic, a biological solution to a demographic problem. The irony tasted bitter. Voices echoed around her, official, bored, procedural. They spoke of efficiency, compatibility, optimization. Not once did they speak of her. She clenched her hands. Fear pressed against her chest, but pride held her spine upright. If she had to face this fate, she would not beg. Then something happened that wasn't in any official script. A loud crash ripped through the chamber. The doors on the far side burst open with a screech of metal protesting against forced entry. Guards turned in confusion. Officials froze mid-sentence. For a moment, the entire ritual collapsed into chaos. A human stumbled into the chamber. He didn't look heroic. His clothes were dusty, his jacket torn at the sleeve, his hair disheveled like he'd run through half a station without knowing where he was going. His eyes darted from the pit to the officials to the guards, then back to the pit again, as if he'd just walked into the wrong meeting and was trying to figure out how badly he'd messed up. "What is this place?" he muttered, half to himself. No one answered him immediately, because no one had ever planned for this question. She looked at him, confused. Humans were rare visitors here, and never in restricted ceremonial zones. They were known for emotional unpredictability, informal speech, and a strange tendency to interfere in matters that did not concern them. One of the guards stepped forward, weapon raised. "Unauthorized presence. Leave immediately." The human blinked, then looked down into the pit. His expression changed, not into fear, not into curiosity, but into something she had seen only in stories about humans. Anger. "You're throwing her in there?" he asked. The official nearest him sighed like a tired administrator dealing with paperwork. "This is not your concern. Return to your designated area." He took a step closer instead of stepping back. She felt the moment shift, like the air before a storm. Before anyone could stop him, he moved. He ran forward, grabbed her wrist, and pulled her away from the edge. The motion was sudden, clumsy, and completely irrational by alien standards. For a fraction of a second she didn't move. No one had ever touched her like that before, not with ownership, not with authority, but with urgency. Then alarms erupted. Guards shouted. Officials panicked. The chamber, once orderly, turned into a mess of flashing lights and raised weapons. The human didn't hesitate. He yanked her forward again, half dragging her as he sprinted toward the exit. "Run!" he shouted, as if she needed the instruction. She ran. They burst into corridors filled with echoing footsteps and metallic echoes. She struggled to keep pace, her long strides awkward in unfamiliar gravity. He kept glancing back, swearing under his breath, navigating turns with reckless instinct rather than logic. Eventually, they slammed through a maintenance hatch and collapsed into a narrow passage where the alarms sounded distant and confused. He leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. She stared at him. For several seconds neither of them spoke. "You're welcome," he said finally, trying to sound casual but failing. She tilted her head, studying him like a phenomenon she had never encountered in her research. "You interrupted a legally sanctioned procedure." "Yeah," he replied. "I noticed. You risked imprisonment. Wouldn't be my first bad decision." She hesitated. "You did not ask who I was." He shrugged. "Didn't seem important compared to the whole pit thing." The simplicity of his answer unsettled her more than fear ever had. Silence settled between them, awkward and heavy. Then she spoke again, slower this time. You have created a problem. He frowned. I thought I solved one. She shook her head slightly. By the laws of my people, I am now unprocessed. Unassigned. Unbonded. He blinked. Okay, that sounds bad. It is worse than bad, she said calmly. If I am discovered without proof of bonding, I will be returned to the pit. With fewer procedural delays. He stared at her, trying to process the information. So what do we do? She looked at him, her eyes steady, her voice quiet but absolute. There is only one solution, she said. He swallowed. I'm afraid to ask. She stepped closer, her posture still dignified despite everything that had happened. You must become my partner, she said. The human froze. Somewhere in the distance, alarms echoed again, searching for them. And in that moment, neither of them realized that the most dangerous part of the story had not been the pit at all. The corridor felt colder the longer they stayed there, as if the station itself disapproved of what had just happened. The human kept glancing toward the hatch, expecting guards to burst through at any second. She, on the other hand, stood unnervingly calm, as if she had already accepted the consequences of chaos. You said partner, he finally said, breaking the silence. Like business partner? Legal partner? Strategic alliance partner? Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in concentration. Your language contains too many ambiguous categories, she replied. In my culture, the term I use means a bonded individual whose existence is officially linked to mine in emotional, social, and biological registries. He stared at her. She watched his expression carefully, as if collecting data. That sounds, he said slowly, extremely serious. It is, she said. He opened his mouth, closed it, ran a hand through his hair, and looked down the corridor again. Okay. Hypothetically. Let's say I don't do that. Then I will be recaptured, she said matter-of-factly. And the next procedure will not involve ceremonial delays. He sighed, long and heavy, like a man negotiating with fate and losing. This is how I die, he muttered. Not in a battle. Not in space. But in paperwork and emotional responsibility. She tilted her head again. You are speaking in metaphors. Yeah, he said. That's my thing. They moved quietly through maintenance tunnels until they reached a small docking bay where his ship was parked. It was not impressive, more like something built from spare parts and stubbornness than from official design. When the hatch closed behind them, the silence felt safer. She walked slowly around the interior, touching surfaces lightly with her fingers. Her eyes widened at ordinary objects, a cracked screen, a pile of clothes, a dented control panel. Everything seemed to fascinate her. This vessel is inefficient, she said. Thanks, he replied. It is also personal, she added. He paused. What does that mean? In my species, she explained, vessels are communal property. No individual leaves personal marks. Your ship reflects your habits, your errors, your priorities. He looked around as if seeing his ship for the first time. Yeah, well, humans are messy. She nodded, as if that confirmed a hypothesis. When they finally lifted off, the station shrinking behind them, he felt a strange mix of relief and dread. He had saved her, yes, but now he had brought a walking interstellar legal disaster into his life. As soon as they entered open space, she turned toward him again. We must begin preparations, she said. For what? He asked. For convincing my people that we are bonded. He stared at her. There's convincing involved? Yes, she said. Your emotional expression appears inconsistent. We must standardize it. He dropped into the pilot's chair with a groan. I should have stayed in bed today. She stepped closer, studying him with unsettling intensity. First, she said, we must establish visible proximity. Bonded pairs maintain reduced physical distance. He nearly choked on air. Reduced what? She moved closer, until she was standing beside him instead of across the cabin. Not touching, but close enough that he could feel her presence, her warmth, the faint unfamiliar scent of her skin. Like this, she said. He stared straight ahead at the controls. Right. Totally normal. Just two individuals, standing, extremely near each other. She nodded approvingly. Second, she continued, bonded pairs share personal information to demonstrate emotional interdependence. He glanced sideways. You mean talking? Yes. He exhaled slowly. Okay. That one I can handle. She began immediately. Tell me your most persistent emotional regret. He froze. We are not starting with that. Why not? Because humans don't usually start conversations like that, he said. She frowned slightly. Your species begins conversations with inaccurate statements about weather. Exactly, he said. It's tradition. She considered this, then nodded again. Very well. Describe the atmospheric conditions of your home planet. He blinked. Sometimes hot, sometimes cold. Occasionally rain. She typed something into a small device she had pulled from her sleeve. Fascinating. During the journey, she watched everything he did as if it were a demonstration. When he prepared food, she analyzed the process. When he sat down, she observed posture. When he laughed at something on the screen, she replayed the moment, trying to identify the cause. At one point, she paused a human romantic film he had absent-mindedly turned on. This scene, she said, pointing at the screen, is inaccurate. He looked at it. It's just a movie. The characters claim to feel love after minimal shared experiences, she said. Statistically improbable. He shrugged. Humans aren't big on statistics. She looked at him thoughtfully. That explains many of your species' historical decisions. By the time they reached his apartment on Earth, he felt exhausted, like he had spent an entire day explaining reality to an alien scientist who refused to accept that reality was illogical. His apartment was small. Too small for visitors, let alone interstellar refugees with existential problems. She stepped inside and stopped, looking around with silent awe. This is your territory, she said. It's just a rented place, he replied. She walked slowly across the room, touching the wall, the table, the window. You inhabit this space alone? Yeah, he said. Why? He shrugged. Didn't really find anyone who wanted to stay. She looked at him longer than necessary, as if recalculating something. Then a sharp sound interrupted them. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and felt his stomach drop. She noticed his reaction. What does that signal indicate? Trouble, he said quietly. He opened the message. It was not from a friend, not from work. It was from an unknown contact, written in a precise, formal style that made his skin crawl. We are aware that the subject has not been processed. Verification will occur soon. He looked up slowly. She was already looking at him. Our time frame has shortened, she said calmly. Outside the window, the city lights flickered, unaware that somewhere in a small apartment, a human and an alien were about to attempt the most ridiculous performance in the galaxy, pretending to be in love, before anyone else decided their fate for them. The knock on the door came sooner than either of them expected. It wasn't loud, but it was precise, 3 controlled taps, evenly spaced, as if whoever stood outside had practiced the rhythm. The human felt his chest tighten. He looked at her. She looked back at him with an expression that was calm on the surface but sharper underneath. They have arrived, she said quietly. He swallowed. Already? She nodded. My people do not waste time when systems are disrupted. He walked toward the door like someone heading toward an exam he hadn't studied for. For a moment, he considered pretending not to be home, but she had already moved closer to him, standing just slightly behind his shoulder, her presence steady and unyielding. Remember, she whispered, we must behave inconsistently. He blinked. What? Inconsistent emotional behavior is considered proof of authenticity in human relationships, she explained. According to my research. Your research is going to get us arrested, he murmured, then opened the door. Two figures stood in the hallway. They looked almost human at first glance, tall, composed, dressed in neutral clothing, but their eyes were too still, their movements too precise. They didn't smile. Good evening, one of them said. We are conducting a routine cultural verification. He forced a casual tone. Sure. Come in. Routine. Love that. They stepped inside, scanning the apartment with quiet efficiency. The room suddenly felt smaller. She moved instantly, stepping closer to him. Her hand hovered near his arm, then lightly touched it, as if testing something fragile. He froze, then slowly relaxed his posture, pretending this was normal. The inspectors observed everything. You are cohabiting, one of them stated. Yes, he replied too quickly. I mean, yeah? Obviously. She tilted her head and added, he is inefficient at organizing domestic resources but displays consistent emotional reliability. The inspectors paused. He stared at her out of the corner of his eye. Emotional reliability? They asked questions: how long they had known each other, how often they shared meals, how they resolved disagreements. He improvised answers with increasing desperation. She, meanwhile, answered with alarming honesty. He refuses to admit emotional vulnerability, she said at one point. He coughed. I do not. She looked at him. You have not disclosed your persistent regret. He glared at her. We agreed not to bring that up. The inspectors exchanged a brief glance, then made notes on their devices. After what felt like an eternity, they stepped toward the door. We will return, one of them said. Authenticity requires longitudinal observation. When the door finally closed behind them, the apartment felt like it exhaled. He collapsed onto the couch. That was terrible. It was adequate, she said, sitting beside him. He turned his head slowly. She was closer than before, not just physically but somehow emotionally, her expression thoughtful rather than analytical. You did well, she added. He let out a short laugh. I lied for 15 minutes straight. Yes, she said. Humans often demonstrate affection through deception. He looked at her. That is not how affection works. She studied him. Then explain it. He hesitated. It's complicated. She nodded. Most human phenomena are. For a while, either of them spoke. The city outside continued its noise, unaware of interspecies diplomacy happening in a cramped apartment. Finally, she broke the silence. When you told them our bond was real, she said, your vocal frequency changed. He frowned. What does that mean? In my species, vocal deviation indicates emotional interference, she said. It occurs when an individual experiences internal conflict between truth and intention. He looked away. You're reading too much into it. Perhaps, she said quietly. But your behavior differs when you speak about me. He didn't answer. The next days passed strangely. They practiced being a couple. At first, it felt ridiculous. She insisted on observing how humans interacted in public spaces. They sat in cafes where she analyzed couples like scientific experiments. Why does that pair argue while smiling? She asked once. Because humans are confusing, he replied. Why does that individual touch the other's hand and then immediately withdraw? She asked another time. He shrugged. Fear of being rejected. She stared at the couple for a long moment, then looked at him. Do you fear rejection? She asked. He almost spilled his drink. Why would you ask that? She considered him carefully. Your species avoids emotional risk despite claiming to value connection. He looked down at the table. Sometimes. She nodded slowly, as if storing the answer somewhere important. At home, things became even stranger. She started mirroring his habits without realizing it. She sat where he sat, watched what he watched, listened when he spoke, even when he insisted nothing he said was important. One night, While he was half asleep on the couch, he heard her voice. "Why did you rescue me?" she asked softly. He opened his eyes. She stood near the window, looking out at the city. "You could have ignored the situation," she continued. "Your species often avoids involvement in foreign systems." He thought for a moment. "I don't know. It just felt wrong." She turned toward him. "Wrong according to what criteria?" He hesitated. "According to me." She walked closer, stopping a few steps away. "In my society," she said, "no one would have done what you did. It would have been considered irrational." He shrugged weakly. "Humans are famous for that." She looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. "Your irrationality altered my entire existence," she said quietly. The words settled between them, heavy and delicate. He tried to respond with humor. "Yeah, well, sorry about that." She didn't laugh. The next morning, he overheard something he wasn't meant to. He had woken early and walked toward the kitchen when he heard her voice through the thin wall. She was speaking into her device, her tone formal again. "The simulation is unstable," she said. "Yes, the human subject continues to behave unpredictably." He stopped. "Emotional variables are increasing," she continued. "I am uncertain whether they are strategic or genuine." He felt something twist in his chest. Later that day, he acted differently. Quieter. Distant. She noticed immediately. "You are deviating from established behavioral patterns," she said while he washed dishes. "Maybe I'm tired," he replied. She watched him. "You are avoiding eye contact." He shrugged. "So?" She stepped closer. "Explain." He turned to face her, frustration flashing briefly in his eyes. "This whole thing," he said. "It's supposed to be fake, remember?" She froze slightly. "You said it yourself," he continued. "We're pretending. For survival. For your people. For the inspectors. That's it." Her expression changed, not dramatically, but subtly. Her posture stiffened. "Yes," she said slowly. "That is correct." He immediately regretted his tone, but pride stopped him from apologizing. She walked past him without another word. That night, the apartment felt colder than before. He sat alone on the couch, staring at nothing, replaying his own words. He told himself he had said what was necessary, what was logical. But logic didn't stop the strange feeling in his chest. In the other room, she sat by the window, looking out at the city lights, her reflection faint in the glass. For the first time since she had been rescued, she felt something she had never studied, never classified, and never expected. Doubt. And beneath it, something far more dangerous. Not fear of the pit. But fear that what she was beginning to feel for him might not be part of the act at all. The sound of the knock came again, but this time it wasn't careful or polite. It was firm, deliberate, impossible to ignore. He felt it before he heard it properly, like the echo of a future he had been trying not to imagine. He looked toward the door. She was already standing, her posture straight, her expression composed in that quiet, disciplined way that made it impossible to tell what she felt. "They have returned," she said. He nodded once, though his stomach tightened. For a moment, neither of them moved. The apartment felt suspended in time, as if the walls themselves understood that something irreversible was about to happen. He walked to the door and opened it. This time, there were more of them. Their presence filled the hallway with an unnatural stillness. They stepped inside without waiting for permission, their eyes scanning everything again, but with less curiosity and more certainty. "The evaluation period has concluded," one of them said. "We will finalize classification." She stepped forward before he could speak. "I am prepared," she said calmly. He turned toward her sharply. "Prepared for what?" Her voice didn't change. "For reassignment, if necessary." The words hit harder than he expected. The inspectors activated their devices. Symbols flickered across translucent screens. They asked fewer questions this time, their tone colder, their expressions less patient. Demonstrate bond consistency, one of them ordered. He felt his throat go dry. She turned toward him slowly. For a moment, her gaze flickered, something between logic and emotion, between duty and hesitation. Then she stepped closer. Her hand reached for his, not tentatively, not experimentally, but with quiet certainty. Her fingers wrapped around his, warm and steady. He felt the contact like an electric shock. "This is my chosen human," she said. The inspectors observed silently. He looked at her hand in his, then at her face. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were different from before, less analytical, more human. One of the inspectors tilted their head. "Your bond was initially described as procedural." "It was," she replied. "And now?" She paused for a fraction of a second. He felt her grip tighten slightly. "Now it is voluntary," she said. The room felt suddenly too small. The inspectors exchanged silent signals. Their devices emitted faint tones. The evaluation algorithms ran, recalculated, hesitated. "This outcome is statistically improbable," one of them said. He felt something rise in his chest, something stubborn, reckless, unmistakably human. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's kind of our specialty." They turned toward him. "Human emotional structures lack stability," one inspector stated. "Your species frequently abandons bonds when conditions change." He didn't look away. "Maybe," he said. "But we also choose them when there's no reason to." The inspector studied him as if he were a malfunctioning machine. She looked at him then, not as a subject, not as a rescue mission, but as someone she was seeing clearly for the first time. "In my society," she said softly, "bonds are assigned to preserve systems." He nodded slightly. "In his society," she continued, "bonds are created to preserve individuals." The inspectors fell silent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one of them deactivated their device. "Your status will be recorded as bonded," they said. "Further intervention is unnecessary." He exhaled slowly, only then realizing how tense his body had been. The inspectors turned and left without another word, their footsteps fading down the hallway like echoes from a life that no longer belonged to her. When the door closed, the apartment felt strangely brighter. Neither of them spoke at first. She released his hand slowly, as if unsure whether she should. He didn't move away. For a moment they simply stood there, close but not touching, suspended between what had been pretend and what had become something else. "You didn't have to say that," he said finally. She looked at him. "Say what?" "That it was voluntary." She considered his words carefully. "I am no longer certain where procedure ends and preference begins," she said. He gave a quiet, uncertain laugh. "Welcome to being human." She looked around the apartment again, the small space, the imperfect furniture, the scattered signs of his solitary life. "This environment is inefficient," she said. "Still true," he replied. "It is also," she paused, searching for the right word, "acceptable." He smiled faintly. Later, they sat on the couch, not quite touching, not quite distant. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to interstellar drama. "Your people think humans are emotionally unstable," he said. "Yes," she replied. He glanced at her. "Do you agree?" She thought for a moment. "Your emotions are unpredictable," she said. "They disrupt logic, compromise efficiency, and generate unnecessary risk." He nodded slowly. "That sounds about right." She turned her head toward him. "But," she added, "they also generate courage, defiance, and connection." He looked at her. "In my society," she said quietly, "I was a problem to be solved. Here I am, a choice." The word felt heavy and fragile in the air. He didn't try to joke this time. "Guess we're both in trouble," he said softly. She tilted her head slightly. "Why?" "Because now," he said, "we can't even pretend this is fake anymore." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, something unfamiliar curved her lips upward, Not a perfect human smile, but something close enough to be dangerous. If pretending was the objective, she said, your species has failed. He laughed quietly. Somewhere in the distance, alien officials filed reports about irrational humans and statistically impossible bonds. In a small apartment on a crowded planet, a human and an alien sat side by side, unsure of the future, unsure of the rules, and completely aware that whatever they had created was neither planned nor logical. And for the first time in her life, she felt something no algorithm could measure. Not obligation. Not survival. But the strange, reckless, absurd comfort of having chosen someone, and being chosen back.